So the idea is that by using this strategy, people can, without having to focus on it, sketch out a sense of what is going on, and then through guided instruction, come to get some insights about what they're seeing and not seeing, and therefore having some skills to disrupt those things that need to be disrupted. So without further ado, I'll introduce Emily Gates, who is, along with Aileen Reid and Clara Shim, going to walk you through using this strategy. Emily?
Yes, thank you very much, Melvin. Welcome everybody to the session. Those of you that can, I'm going to invite you to take off your camera and say hello, and also to drop your name and role or affiliation into the chat so we can see who's here. This is, it's a symposium, but it's actually a workshop. It's an interactive session. And so it's going to be hands-on in the virtual sense where you'll meet each other and you'll be sharing some work that you'll do, which hopefully will generate some insights, just as Melvin said, that you can take with you as you leave. So welcome. I wanted to see some faces also for some comfort virtually to connect with you, because doing a workshop can be even more awkward over the computer than in person. So yes, welcome, welcome. And Clara and Aileen are going to help field the chat. Yep, there they are. Okay, great. So you'll see the chat. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my screen sharing going, and then we'll tell you the agenda. And then for the part that I'm just talking, again, you can feel free to turn your camera off if you want. Then the middle part of our session is going to be cameras back on and interaction. That'll be the setup, but I'll explain a little bit more in a second. Okay. Also, I'm not sure if this is pointed out at every session, but we are recording this. So I just want to let people know that it's being recorded. Okay, great. So the session is called Rich Pictures. Well, you heard the long title already, but really we're talking about a method from soft systems methodology. And we see this as offering a lot of value to culturally responsive evaluation. And so we want to share our experiences with it and have you get your hands using it so that maybe you might use it in your practice. My name is Emily Gates. So I'm an assistant professor at Boston College in the Department of Measurement, Evaluation, Statistics, and Assessment. And I'm going into my 4th year now. Before that, I was at CDC doing public health evaluation work. So my evaluation work is mostly in STEM education and public health generally. And I do research on evaluation, looking at values, equity, and also systems approaches. Actually, Aileen, I'm going to invite you and then Clara to introduce yourselves again, just so everybody gets a sense of who's leading the session, and then I'll go on.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aileen Reid. I'm an assistant professor at UNC Greensboro in the Educational Research Methodology Department. My background is in evaluation and measurement, and currently I lead evaluations for upwards of 10, probably a little bit more than that, NSF evaluations focused on mostly STEM education.
And hi, everyone. My name is Clara Shim. I am currently a doctoral student at Boston College, and I am very much interested in learning more about how systems thinking applies in the field of education.
Thanks, Clara. Oops. Okay, so we had a few opening remarks already. And then the first part of our session, I'm going to talk us through what rich pictures are, give you a sense of their background, their origin in the system sciences fields, and then also give you some information about how you can use them. After we go through and I'm going to talk about some of the assumptions behind them as well. That'll be part 1. Part 2 will be this skill building exercise, and Aileen will lead that section. We're going to give you some guidance and then split into breakout groups where you can choose what kind of what your focus or your theme for your picture will be. And then you'll get a chance to share what you drew and what emerges from what you drew in small groups, and then we'll debrief as a larger group. And then in the last part, Clara is going to share some examples that we've all been involved in different ways where we've applied this, because we've applied this in workshops with faculty, also within evaluations. And I've also used it teaching evaluation courses. So we want to give you a sense of the variety or the various ways that you can use it. Aileen, will you just interrupt me, or Clara, if there are any chat comments that come? Feel free to ask questions as I'm talking. I will keep a steady pace so that you can also interrupt me, participants on the line, because this is really giving you a foundation as to what rich pictures are. This was already set up by Dr. Hall, but I wanted to come back to it. So there's a quote here, and those of you that don't know Melvin Hall's scholarship, it's really incredible in the field of evaluation. He's led the way in many areas, but in particular having conversations about race and class and intersectional identities in relation to the way that we see and relate to each other in evaluation and assessment practice. And so just as he set up, what we want to play with in this session is not just the systems method as it was designed, but how can we use this to interrogate some of the assumptions built into our way of seeing, our way of relating to situations and systems that otherwise might not have been surfaced. And it's also going to be a really good process to stimulate that conversation with other people, because they're usually really hard conversations to have. And so this gives you an entry point into those. So what are rich pictures? As I mentioned, it's a method from soft systems methodology, and we see it being really well suited for culturally responsive evaluation. Here's one of an early one that a colleague did for a project in this red frame here. Right away, you see that they're not particularly great in terms of their artistic quality. It's not about art. You don't see any words, but you see different symbols. You see a whole situation depicted in there. And you see colors, you see shapes, you see icons. And right away, I'm hoping that it raises some questions around what is happening. What does that mean and what is happening? And that's really the idea. The picture is supposed to capture in all of the richness what is happening in a situation, and in particular, a situation that people are concerned about and they want to try to change. So they want to understand in order to act. If you're not familiar with the system science fields in general, I like to put up this map. It is done by Ray Eisen, who's based at Open University. There are several versions of this, but I'm going to walk us through this for a second. So on the left side, you see different disciplines that you're more familiar with: biology, econ, sociology. Then you see toward the bottom, engineering, anthropology. These are disciplines that still exist at our universities and in which some of us are trained, or some of which even we teach in. In the middle, you see these blue blobs. These are really what are known as schools of thought or subfields within the systems and complexity sciences. So as different disciplines studied systems and started to understand what systems were, how they worked, and at different scales and for different purposes, there are these clusters of fields that emerged. And then the arrows in between the left and the middle blobs are different theorists. So there's a whole body of scholarship that's as old as the evaluation field that really focuses on systems. On the right here, in that lighter blue box, these are the different methodologies and approaches, and sometimes they're also schools of thought, but for the most part, they're methodologies and approaches that were developed based on certain fields and theorists, and then they went into practice, and people evolved them as they practiced in different organizations. And so what I want to call your attention to is on the very right, there's a sort of a continuum from systems as epistemology to system as ontology. As the system science and complexity sciences developed over the last 4 or 5 decades, there was a real shift and growth from an understanding of systems as real, in a sense that they're objective, we can see them, they have a material reality, and if we were going to talk about the system, we would all be talking about the same thing. As people really did systems change work, and the school of thought that I come from thinks about systems as epistemological constructs and social constructs. So it's not that there's one system or that there's a couple of systems. When we actually interrogate the boundaries of the system, we understand the nature of the system differently. And so really thinking about how we can use systems and related systems terms from that epistemological standpoint, acknowledging that we each set our boundaries different in relation to them, and that it should be purposeful. How can we use systems in a way that is going to motivate action? So that's a little background. And then the other piece on the bottom here is critical systems. So my own viewpoint comes from not just an idea that we would study systems or model them, or that we would try to change them, but we would really change them from a critical lens, which means that we would just actually, as the talk right before here, Dr. Nasir's speech was emphasizing, like, how do we change systems and build equity into those systems so that they work better for everybody, but particularly for people in groups that historically have been excluded and marginalized by the systems. I also like to show this slide between hard and soft. So again, if you're new to system sciences, people make this distinction. It's not perfect. It's very much like quantitative and qualitative, and how once you get into research methodology, you realize there's a lot more to it than numbers and words. But in a similar way, in the systems fields, there's a contrast between hard and soft systems, and people who are really oriented in systems engineering and think about modeling systems are on the top side of this diagram and really tend to think about, and we also think this way in our everyday language, that there are sort of systems out there and we should find them, we should model them, and then we could identify leverage points to change them. Where I'm coming from and where this methodology comes from is in the bottom part, which sees the world as interconnected and dynamic and constantly in flux. And we are part of the world as social creatures. And so our culture lenses shape actually what we make to be a particular system. And so we start from this place of complexity, and then from there, we construct the system of interest that we might want to change. And this will make even more sense when you get into the rich picturing, because there are methods to diagram systems and to identify leverage points or areas to influence systems. And this is a form of system diagramming, but it's really focused on the complexity of the situation first, and then you would go into the system diagramming. Any questions so far, or things coming up in the chat, Aileen, that I should address? Okay.
No comments in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, and so coming from this critical position, and also we hear this a lot in the media in the last year and a half, the system was not designed by or for us. So who designed these systems? And again, Dr. Nasir talked about this historically. We created these systems. So who's the we there, and what were they created to do, and who was supposed to benefit from them? And then this idea that system has to change. So we want to change the system. Both of those are really important things. But in my view, and what this session is premised on, is if we jump right into critiquing the system and trying to change it, we actually miss this understanding of how we each relate differently to what matters in relation to the situation that we're concerned about. So yes, we can work towards changing systems, but not getting caught up in the fact that there's one system, but rather engaging with the different perspectives that we bring and the different values we bring, and then figuring out what to do about those in relation to what we're trying to work toward. If you are familiar with system change work, that's also getting a lot of buzz. I'm going to show two popular images. One of these comes out of like a longtime systems thinker. Peter Senge is one of the co-authors of this. This was, I think, an FSG publication, The 6 Conditions of System Change. So again, as people have studied different kinds of social systems in particular, and modeled them in different ways, these different blue areas in this triangle or inverted triangle are the areas that we could identify leverage points, we could try to change. And what I'm showing in using this is that deep inside of doing system change work is this questioning. Dr. Nasir called it questioning the ideology. Here we're thinking about questioning mental models, the way that we see the system, the way that we see the situation that we care about, the way that we relate to it, that those have to be interrogated. Those are implicit, and those are actually what keep a lot of the problematic dynamics in place, and are a route then for transforming systems, not just changing them, but transforming their structures as well as their outcomes. So the work we're going to be doing is thinking about how do we surface these mental models and ask questions of them to see if we can find in our own way of seeing implicitly, or others' ways of seeing implicitly, some areas of change with regards to these deep mental models. This iceberg is another diagram or another version of system change work that gets a lot of traction, gets used a lot. And so similarly, it's a different way of making the same point, that when we go to change a system, if we start from this reactionary point of saying, oh, this happened, this needs to be fixed, it's at a very surface level. And then when we start studying systems or situations from different perspectives, we can identify some of these patterns and trends, then we can anticipate what we might need to do. But it's even deeper when we get to, okay, what is the structure that holds that pattern in place, that we could design the system differently? And then inside of that or underneath that, really, what are the beliefs, values, and assumptions that people are holding in relation to what education is or what health and well-being means? And what work do we need to do there in relation to the mental models that would then in turn have consequences for these other ways of looking at changing the system? Okay, so we're looking at mental models and we're thinking about this deeper work in terms of transforming at that level. So rich pictures, I think soft systems methodology was in the 70s, I want to say. It's been around for a while, it's evolved. So it's one of those methodologies that's really meant for practice. And so there are many iterations of application. Peter Checkland is the founder of it. This book is 1998, but the one earlier was several decades before that. So it was designed, he came from a business arena, and in working with organizations, then trying to do system diagramming or modeling work, realizing this early on that people understand what they're talking about really differently. And when you get behind the words and see what's inside their heads and their ways of relating, that there is this difference. So it's designed for individuals and also groups to reflect and analyze these complex problems or situations. They don't call them problems per se, because once you call something a problem, you've already bounded it. So we tend to use the word problematic situation, or even situation of interest. If you don't want a framing around problem, just what is the situation of interest that you might want to act and try to change? There we go. So I have it back here too, but at the last slide, we'll share some resources if you want to read more. There are some scholars on the system side and practitioners who have brought both soft systems methodology as well as systems approaches in general into evaluation. So there are some evaluation examples. In essence, you draw a picture and there are a couple of prompts. Beyond that, what happens is the drawing of the picture. And then we use those pictures as this foundation for analyzing what's there in the picture. And then from there, we can start to identify, what does this mean for what we might do? The full methodology, if you were to do it, then does look at different systems and ultimately, what is a system that you could try to influence or redesign? And so we're just doing this very early part of the rich pictures. So what they offer to culturally responsive evaluation, this is a case that we're building. So we're experimenting with applying it in this culturally responsive evaluation context and then building some of the offerings. So one is that they surface and challenge mental models, as I mentioned, and those are inherently culture. So it can be hard to talk about culture, and we can also think that we know about someone else's culture, or we think we know about our own, and we miss the heterogeneity within a group. And so again, this offers a way of looking at some of those cultural assumptions and differences and embracing them and exploring them. There's some work on adaptive learning of this idea of an epistemic object, something that is co-constructed and shared, that people from different backgrounds and different disciplines then can interact with, and that can generate this process of learning together. So it functions in that way. As I mentioned, and thinking about work on culturally responsive and systems approaches already by Veronica Thomas and others, it also lets us look at this social construction of difference. So you can interrogate the picture and look at the people in it and say, what are the axes of difference that show up here? And who's getting access to what? Where are there power imbalances? Where are there resource imbalances? Are these all present, or is there an accumulation over time? Again, depending on what's in the scope of the picture, and thinking about who's getting opportunity and issues of privilege as well. So some of these things that we talk about sometimes in terms of identity, we can actually look at in relation to the situation. And then lastly, catalyzing actions. So I mentioned this as well, but ultimately when there is this shared sense-making process and this analysis and diagnosis, it can move people together to think about well, what do we want to do? And then that in essence could be the foundation of a more systematic needs analysis or asset or appreciative inquiry process, or whatever else you might do in a normal sort of design process. If you use this within an evaluation setting, which we'll talk about as well, it can help us self-reflect and think about what we might do differently within our evaluation planning or our evaluation design. So as I said, we're discovering some of these offerings as we practice using it. So what I do want to emphasize, and Clara and I have been looking at some of the literature on rich pictures as a method. It's not about the picture, which is kind of ironic because it's called rich pictures. There's all this emphasis on picturing, but it's not actually about the picture itself and what's missing in the picture. It's really about the picture in relation to the meaning that people make out of what's in the picture. So when we share examples too, you'll be like, I don't really get it. It looks like a doodle, like anybody could have done that. But then when you ask people to explain it, there's a lot of passion that comes out and a lot of things that they didn't even think they would be sharing come out of the process. And so it's really about what's in the picture that people think is significant, they think is important, or that they think is problematic. And it's going to be messy. It's not just going to be this, not just focused on structure or process like some system modeling. It's also going to have emotion. It's going to have values. It's going to have perspectives in there. And so in that ways, that's the rich part. It really is full in terms of those different dimensions. Okay, so that is it in terms of my intro. Any questions? And I can stop the share for a second too, and just we have time that we can take some questions either in the chat or over audio before we invite you to play with them and use them. Great, welcome. Okay. Any questions so far? Let me just do like show of hands or in the chat. Have people used rich pictures before? Anyone use this already? Okay, thanks, Erin. Okay.
So this will be a fun session.
Okay, and any questions or clarifications I can offer? Okay.
I think this is part of your agenda, but it would just be really helpful to hear just some other examples of like kind of specific like situations in which you've used this and how it's kind of fit into like an evaluation process, just to better be able to think about opportunities.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And this might end up not working for you, we'll see, but we decided to do that last so that you would actually get your hands doing it and see what comes up for you. And then together we could talk about, here's how we've used it. What other ideas do you have? Because you all that's having experience will have other ideas too. Anyone else? Okay, Aileen, I'm going to set you up to set them up.
Yeah, sounds good. So as Emily said, the one thing that resonates with me with rich pictures, it's really transformational work, particularly when you're dealing with issues of equity, looking at values and beliefs, and really focused on dismantling systems, because much of what we do as evaluators is looking at interventions. And so working with whether it's faculty or PIs or organizations to really assess where they are is a critical piece of this. And so we really begin with having the participants or whoever it is that we're working with tell a story of what they see as the situation, what they see as the problem. One of our colleagues, Kelly Mack, that we work with, she said, you know, she's a STEMist, and she always says, you know, I was raised, if I can't draw it, then I don't understand it. And so rich pictures gives us an opportunity to draw or articulate it in another form other than our words. Does that make sense? And so what we're inviting you now to do is to spend some time actually drawing a picture of a problematic situation. We'll in 2 slides, we'll give you some prompts that will kind of guide you, But generally, we want you to give it a name. What is the problem, or what is the situation? And we want you to use mostly pictures and symbols, few words, none if possible. And if you draw lines or arrows, label them to help guide us, to tell us what do they mean. Because all we're gonna see is a picture, like Emily said. It may just seem like a doodle, but to you, it is the essence of your feelings and emotions and beliefs and values about what's going on, this situation. Okay, next slide. And so as you're thinking about this, perhaps you might want to include geography. What's the physical environment like? So for example, if you're working with a group that is maybe a student success issue or a STEM issue, and you're working on a college campus, you're evaluating that campus, you might want to draw or depict that geography in some way or form. Structures and processes, how do these influence what's happening? Later on, we'll give you an example of working with faculty, but there may be ways, if you're looking at inequities, right, between, let's just say, tenure track versus non-tenure track, or other kinds of things. Cultural climate, viewpoints, values, norms of the people involved and affected. Think about how you might illustrate this. How might you communicate the culture of the environment that you're working in? Resources, people, money, things. This is probably one of the easiest because you can draw a money symbol or a stick person or something else like that. Issues, assumptions, conflicts, tensions and agreements, and then purposes or aspirations, goals, motivations surrounding change. So these are, you don't have to include the totality of this because we're not giving you like 5 hours to come up with like an immaculate, like Mona Lisa light, but we do want you to be thoughtful about, well, what can I communicate? What are some of the more salient pieces of this problem or situation that needs to be communicated in this picture, that when one looks at this, that one, I have fully expressed what I see as the problem, because again, this is coming from your vantage point, but also as I begin to describe it or explain it to others, it makes sense, okay? Any questions so far? Okay. So then what we're gonna do is send you into breakout groups and give you some time. So we invite you to, as I'm talking about the breakout groups, maybe look around and make sure you have some colored pens or markers or, you know, a sheet of paper that you can actually write on. And so you can choose a topic. So a couple of ideas we threw out there. This is CREA, and we're dealing with dismantling systems, racist systems and decolonization. And so perhaps we can think about training and participation of evaluators within the field. How do we prepare evaluators? What are some of the barriers? What are some of the challenges? How do you see the current climate? Funding of evaluation and ways that funding influences evaluations. That's another area. Perhaps you have a specific evaluation and its broader context within your own practice that you perhaps are wrestling with. And this is an opportunity just to flesh that out and almost express whatever frustrations or problems you're experiencing. A specific evaluant and its broader context within your practice. Or you can just choose a problematic situation of interest that you feel like you can really depict in this short amount of time and letting your creative juices flow. So I noticed there are about 18 of us on, but 5 of us, so that's about 13. So maybe 4 groups of 3-ish or 5 groups, depending on how that will work out. Emily's already created the breakout groups.
Yeah, I created 5 groups, and I was gonna, maybe first, if we just say in the chat, if you want to work on one of these topics, type the number, because if one group is really full, then we'll just give everybody a breakout group, and when you get there, you can draw to whatever prompt you want to use.
Right.
So can we just see a show of interest in each of these themes if you use the chat and say like, I want to focus on 2, or I want to focus on 4, or 5 means don't have a preference. We'll choose when we get there.
Mhm.
Thanks. 5-1.
Okay. Okay. So far, it looks like 1, 2, and 5 coming up. We got a 3. Okay. So I haven't seen any 4 so far, Emily. So
Yeah, then I think there's at least 2 people in each. So let's leave the numbers. And if you said if you want to focus on 1, go to room 1. If you want to focus on 5, go to room 5. That'll give at least everybody another person. And then, yeah, Aileen said grab some markers or paper. It usually takes about 20, 25 minutes. So we want to give you enough time as you work on your drawing. And then there will be a natural time where you're like, okay, I could keep going, but that's pretty much the gist of what I had that I want to put on paper.
yeah.
And then, Aileen, do you want to set up for the discussion, or do we want to?
Yeah, you can go ahead to the next slide.
Okay.
We'll kind of guide you in terms of time as well. We can broadcast messages to let you know this, start working towards your discussion. So as Emily said, about 20 or 25 minutes, and take time to really be thoughtful, and then stop and have a conversation in your breakout groups. Guide your colleagues through your picture. So the smaller the group, the better. So, depending on how many people are in a group, that would be fine. But, that way it gives time for everyone to be able to look at your picture, ask questions, share insights. And for those who are listening, get curious, ask questions. One easy thing is I notice and I wonder, right? The notice and the wonderings, but other specific questions that you could ask, talk about what stands out to you, what surprises or puzzles you, what concerns you. One, because your colleague would have explained their picture from their vantage point, but then also particularly if you have understanding or context, but even as just an observer, we do this as as evaluators, right? Ask these kinds of questions. Other kinds of questions that adapted from critical systems heuristics. For what and whose purposes or meanings of success dominate, right? So we want to say, from this picture, from this vantage point, what's the dominant voice? Who is successful in this? So for example, when you're thinking about, I always default to STEM ed because that's the world I'm living in, is it the PI or the research team versus the students?
Yeah. Aileen,
Yeah.
I'm wondering if we just pause and come back to the critical systems, because we're flipping the way we've done this, and I just realized I don't want to give too many prompts. And even for those of you that might want to apply this in your practice, because we're not, if we were in the room, we would interrupt you after you've drawn your picture and then give you prompts. If you give all the prompts now, then you might have people censor themselves when they're drawing.
Right, you're right.
And it's already hard for those of us who are really used to using words to draw. And so we just want to support you in drawing, get drawing, and
right.
separate out any sort of question after that. So I would just stick with the.
So we'll come back to these, like Emily said, we'll come back to these. But as you're having those conversations in groups, maybe focus on the first 3. What stands out to you? I noticed this. I wonder this. What concerns you? And then we'll come back to the CSH questions when we come back for a whole group debrief. Perfect.
Okay, so I'm going to go back and put this on the slide. I'll open the breakout groups. In terms of time, Aileen, what are we thinking?
It's right now 3:50. So let's see if we can, 3:50 Eastern, sorry for those who are on a different time zone. Let's draw for about 20 minutes and then discuss. And
10 after we'll check in. Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay, so 10 after, you have 20 full minutes of drawing, and then we'll check in and nudge you to then start sharing. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. Room should be open. And then Aileen and Clara, we can also hop from one room to another. Actually tell me first, did people get a pop-up to say oh, I can go to the room now?
So you go into the breakout rooms and draw. And then after 20 minutes, we want you in the breakout rooms now. And then in 20 minutes, we will broadcast a message to say, stop drawing and have a conversation.
Yeah, so the drawing in the rooms is for moral support. So you can decide whether you have your camera on or off, but it's nice to have it on because then you're drawing together just like in real life.
Mhm.
I see the chat, but now,
It should be open now. Yep.
okay, thanks, Dylan.
If you all are not able to select your room, let us know and we can always assign you there. I'm not seeing anyone joining.
Do we have to be visible? I've tried twice.
Do they have option? Do they have the, has it been set up where they have the option to join on their own, or do we have to assign, Emily?
It shows me that they could join, but I can also assign, I think. So why don't I just start assigning during the chat? It might be like it
I
says.
think you have to open the rooms.
Yeah,
They're open.
It does show that they're open. Like my only option is to close them. Okay, let me start assigning people and just, I don't want to. Oof, even that's not working. Assign to 5. Min, did you get an invite to 5? You're the test.
Nope.
No.
Oh. Let's redo it and set it back up again. Maybe that'll help. There we go. Let's do open all rooms.
Yeah, Aileen, are you controlling it?
I am now.
Okay, good. I was like, someone else.
Do y'all have the option now?
Same problem. Yeah, there. It's not like them.
It
So
says
we can
that
click
you could
join. Yeah, we can
Yeah.
click join, but then when we click yes, it doesn't bring us anywhere.
Huh, that's interesting. It says it's all set up.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we switch course and just do it together in this group. We're
Yeah,
not a big
that's
group,
fine.
just to save our time. Okay, great.
I don't want to waste time. Yep.
And I'm
So
Gabby popped up.
feel free to go off camera and we will come back on in 20 minutes and let you know. I'm gonna go ahead and pause the recording just because it's gonna be 20 minutes dead
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So we can start making our way back. That'd be great. So how did everybody do? How was the process? Estrella, is that how you pronounce your name? I see you shaking your head.
It's CREA, so pretty close.
Estrella.
Yeah, I like it. It's not often that you get asked to draw an evaluation or just draw in general when you're thinking critically. So I always really enjoy these activities and appreciate them because we get to tap into our imagination.
Cool. One more person, just your initial, how was it?
it's just hard to put things into pictures sometimes.
Mhm.
I wanted to avoid words, but it's not possible.
I realized how limited my drawing skills were. I had to use words.
Yeah, you know, it's not a game, we're not looking for the next Mona Lisa. We're just looking for you to express. And so that's the same thing we tell the folks that we work with throughout this process. So since we are not able to go into breakout groups, we thought we'd get some volunteers who wouldn't mind showing your pictures. We do have a Google slide link, Emily, that if you'd like to, and we'll talk about that really quick. There's more than one reason why we want this Google slide link, but it's an easy way for us all to just go and look at your pictures. So if you could take a quick snippet of it with your phone, right? And then just upload it, just choose an empty page and take your phone and upload your picture. So that's one of the reasons why we ask you to put it there. And then the other reason, we'll come back to it later on, but really we like to use your pictures because, as we've said, we do this with different groups. We've done it with faculty, we've done it with PIs and project folks. And so every time we lead a session like this, we like to have a variety of pictures that can just show or display the different ways that it can be used and how we can use it to depict different issues or problems or situations. So in the chat, Emily has posted a slide deck that you can just take a quick picture of yours, and then we can all just kind of scroll through, and we'll ask for maybe 2 to 3 volunteers. You can say, I'm willing to do it in the chat, and we'll give you the opportunity to talk through your picture, and then we can just get some feedback. And everyone else, the slide deck will be there that you can scroll through and look at what others have done, because we won't have time to talk about everyone's pictures.
Just one quick thing to interject, Aileen. Typically, everybody has the same prompt. This is our first time trying it where different people have different prompts. So in our ideal world, you would have chatted with somebody who had the same prompt as you, so you could have had a conversation about your pictures together.
So Emily, you have to give edit access.
I was waiting for someone to tell me because I gave it, I got booted off, and then I'm like, did it work? Okay, I'll change that right away. Okay.
Yeah. So we have Dylan so far and Ezrea. I'm gonna get it. I love names, so I'm gonna try, so just be patient with me. Okay, so Dylan and Alicia, are you volunteering also? Okay, so we have 3. Awesome. All right,
I'm putting a
so
picture in there. Let's try it again. Oops. See if that
let's
works.
see.
It shows on my end that it's available.
It's still view only.
Let's see. I'm gonna hit share because it's in our box.
Yeah, thanks.
It's probably booting you. Okay, hang on. It says anyone with the link can do this. Could you refresh? Everybody, could you just refresh and see if you have access now? Because I'm showing it's anyone with the link.
Yeah, I was able to add a slide.
Awesome. I see everybody popping in now. That's awesome.
Okay. Oh, and then we can change it so people can share their screen. I missed your ask, Aileen. Is that what you want?
Oh no, I was just
well,
and I think I was getting names.
Okay.
Okay. So everyone, so I see folks in there. Oh wow, these are looking good.
I'm gonna nudge Aileen. Do we want to start 1 or 2 people sharing?
Yeah.
Because we need time for some of our examples. I think we've
okay. So we've got a couple up. Hang on. I'm gonna go to present mode and I can share screen since I already have it up.
Okay.
Okay. So just tell me to keep clicking if I'm not on yours. So Ezrea, I'm gonna get it. I am so sorry. Tell me which one is yours.
I am on number 6.
Slide 6. Is it this one?
Yes.
All right, let me hit present. So can you talk us through this?
Yes. So my title is When Nothing Means Something and Something Means Nothing, Depoliticization as Currency and Capital. And this is meant to speak to academic evaluation, just because I come from the world of academic evaluation and research. So this was meant to speak to the vapid words that are often used, like diversity, equity, and inclusion in academia, in order to mean something but not actually say anything. So this person is on a dollar bill, and this person is faceless and has underlines in order to underline words, but there's no actual words on it. So it's meant to represent that there are words being spoken, but they don't truly mean anything. They're just meant to act as currency and then also social capital in evaluation in academia. So this dollar bill is on the front of an academic building. And I drew the crown just to represent capital, but it's also the image of my undergrad college, like just because I happened to be wearing the shirt today, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, the faceless person is meant to be like a faceless facade. So it's meant to represent these words of diversity, equity, and inclusion as being faceless when truly there is a face behind it. So for example, not naming whiteness, but talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Yeah, and then ultimately just talking about the DEI industrial complex and how that's upheld by all of this. And I'm really interested in depoliticization and the ways that we remove the political meaning from words that matter, and especially the ways that we depoliticize and ultimately unmobilize movements that are meant to deconstruct and abolish white Western institutions.
Man, you just struck up all this emotion in me. Any questions from the group? Any notices, any wonderings, any thoughts? And we'll just do that for about a minute and then move on to the next one. Any comments, questions?
I just have one comment, and that is that what you describe as being behind the elements of your picture are so powerful, and they're all sort of when you just explain it, they all really just kind of flow. So it shows the value of the picture as a opening for conversation. It's like on the days when I feel like I really need to talk to somebody, I wear my University of Illinois t-shirt and somebody's bound to strike up a conversation with me. Well, this is the kind of work that elicits that same kind of engagement.
Absolutely, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Melvin. So Ed, you volunteered also. We're just going to keep going for sake of time, but we definitely want the conversation, the dialogue to keep moving. Ed, which page are you on?
I have many uploaded. I've been scrambling here to make a format that Google will accept. So
Okay.
Move on. Yeah.
Alicia then, thanks Ed. Just let us know when Alicia's done. Alicia, what page are you on?
I'm on slide 3.
Slide 3.
I cheated and did pictures. That was my quick go-to. I ask other people to do this and I feel like really bad for just going straight to pictures. It's the analytical side of me, maybe. I need to get in my arts creative side more. So I'm an internal evaluator, and our team is asked to do more data at times than evaluation. And that is, we have very complex issues. We're in the heart of Little Village in Chicago, serving a predominantly Latino immigrant community. Lots of complex issues, lots of partnerships, lots of collaboratives, lots of networks, lots of beautiful work going on. lots of beautiful work I would love to display with visuals and, you know, beautiful statistics and what have you, but the increasing funding that we get to support this community means increasing reporting and compliance and data reports. And the pandemic has exacerbated that along with the issues. So it becomes weekly, bi-weekly reporting, tables to meet at. So for our team, that's really important to support other teams with that. But what that equals out to is the capacity is low. And our staff and projects to start defining this work from the community perspective is low. There's not a lot of time to reflect, have to be reactive. And it's frustrating sometimes. So that's kind of what this visual is about.
Thanks for sharing. Any thoughts from colleagues? Any questions? What do you notice? What do you wonder? Any questions for Alicia to clarify?
I have a noisy dog, but those of you that are going to pick this up and use it, you can adapt the rules however you want, but in rich pictures, the idea is to as much as possible get the complexity and the interconnections. And it's interesting in these two examples and what happened in another workshop we did, the narrative came through so strongly. It was like the person speaking had such, it was like the first one that you shared, the symbolism of it was so strong, but we really actually don't want the narrative as much as we want the richness of the situation. I don't know if that makes sense. So yeah, that's just a comment on process. Does that make sense? Like it reveals how strong the narrative is, and if you had done that, like if you had done created yours in a group with a couple other people, would they have the same narratives, right? Like that's what it would reveal. So I would also encourage in doing it with multiple people. And Melvin prompted me to remind people as well, like if you do it in a group, there's different times and ways to do that. So you can have people draw individual pictures, and that would have come out in these two, and then share. You can also do, which we do often, is have people draw together. So somebody gets started and then somebody is asked, and you're actually co-constructing the story and then seeing, are we having the same experience and the perception, or are these sort of are they different, right? In some ways, yeah. No, not say anything else on process due to time.
So we have about 15 minutes, Emily. So do we want to go to some examples or?
I think so.
15 minutes left for the session. And then, Ed, were you able to get your picture up?
Yeah, we can do one. We
can do one more then.
Number 7.
Okay, hang on one second. Number 7. Hang on. Slide 7, this one?
I don't see it yet.
Oh, did I?
All I see is you.
Okay, because I undid my share screen.
Oh, there it goes.
Okay, here we go. Let's give it a second. All right.
All right. I have a pencil available and a couple colors. This is a schoolhouse. Students, and they're unhappy. This would be a teacher, larger in size. The teacher's got this in mind, and there's a lot of other ideas out there. Maybe you can guess the work I do from this. So then in this left side, we see a syllabus in this form. The question is how to get to this place where everybody's happy. They all have a common idea. The suggestion is a very carefully constructed syllabus. The work I do is helping faculty with writing learning objectives or assignments that attach to those learning objectives, learning assessment work. Yeah.
And so in your own words, what would you, like, what's the problem for you? What's the situation? What is gnawing at you here?
Yeah, the question here is how to go from here to here, really.
From this
Even,
syllabus to this syllabus?
yep, or from people having a misunderstanding about what is expected in the class to being happy because they all have a common idea about what is expected, at least, you know, reasonably common. They're working on the same direction.
Mhm. Okay. Thanks, Ed.
Sure.
Any questions from the group? And notice we're not dominating the Q&A. We want you, because this is part of the process, to ask these questions, to even help those who have created the picture to think about it on another level. Emily, I'm going to punt to you right now.
Okay, I can share screen.
Hang on, did I stop sharing? Okay.
Yeah, you stopped sharing, I think, but I can do it back up and then give it to Clara. So Clara will share, yeah, she's going to share a couple different examples of how we've used this, and I'm happy to try, like, you know, outside of this, our time together about ideas for using it. But I want to reserve this time for you, Clara. Aileen, do you want me to share?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay, I think I've got it. And I think we've got about 7 or 8 minutes, Clara. We need to leave time for.
Yes, I'll make sure to do that. Perfect. So now that we've had a chance to really try drawing out our own rich pictures, we definitely wanted to talk about how we've been able to use rich pictures within our specific evaluation contexts. And there are 3 different examples we wanted to highlight. The first being the STEM squared network. So to briefly talk about the network itself, it is a multi-institutional higher education network actually based in New York. I think it's planning on expanding, but that's where it started. And it is funded by the National Science Foundation to transform the culture of STEM higher education so that it can be a lot more inclusive and help students reach their STEM career goals. So that is their ultimate purpose. That is what they wrote in their proposal. And for us as the evaluators, our role in using rich pictures was to help the faculty members within these higher education institutions who are part of this network to ultimately identify student pathways to STEM degrees at the institutions in which the network participants were faculty at. So it was part of the very initial stages of figuring out exactly what kind of context or environment they were kind of positioned within, and rich pictures were used to kind of identify that. So this is the actual rich pictures here. As you can see, in identifying the different pathways that students can take in STEM education, this was one of the examples that the faculty members within one higher education institution was able to produce. And there's a lot of colors, there's a lot of shapes, there's a lot of arrows, and just to start with the conversation, there are 5 different peaks, the mountain peaks, that represent the different programs within this STEM field in this higher education institution. So whether it's in the chat box, or maybe we can just briefly highlight some of the things that you really notice within this rich picture. Basically, what do you actually notice here that is prominent for you, that kind of resonates with you? What kind of surprises you about this? And yeah, what do you think the different things represent? So just in terms of time, I guess I can kind of point out some of the things and ask the group what you believe it represents. So one of the things that I saw from the beginning was the orange line.
Sorry
Can anyone?
You, but I think because of time, Zoom will actually cut us off at 45. So I don't think we can explain the meaning of these, but from a methodological point of view, that's what we would do. Just like you did, people would explain it, And then we would have some critical prompts for them to engage in. And we usually do very little. They have a conversation about what's revealed in the picture. Yeah, thank you, Clara.
Thank you.
I want to focus on giving people some different ways to use it. Yeah.
Yes. So example 2 is ACNU Institute for Non-Tenure Track Faculty in Institutional Transformation. So here, rich pictures were used to examine the perspectives of the non-tenure track faculty within this field of STEM teaching and learning. So rich pictures allowed the STEM faculty to really understand the situation that they are put in from their lens and to reveal some of the root causes and opportunities for institutional transformation. And in a way, it was kind of therapeutic or cathartic for many participants. There are 2 examples that we wanted to briefly show. This one, very visually impactful. Should we also look at the second one as well? There we go. So it really represents some of the complex relationships between some of the main stakeholders and the context.
Great. Yeah. So you can imagine the questions we'd ask about, like, where are the resource flows? What do the orange people mean? And do they have more or less power? Where are students in here? Often students are presented as a mob of stick people off to the side. Even at our higher education institutions, what does that reveal? So you can make your own prompts up in relation to what's revealed in the pictures.
And finally, with the third example here, how can rich pictures be used when you are teaching evaluation, maybe for grad students or undergrad students learning evaluation? So within that context, we can use it when helping students understand how to develop evaluation plans and to allow the students to really understand and examine the context surrounding a specific evaluation and really understanding some of the problems and needs that motivated the social intervention in the first place. So that's kind of the overall view of how rich pictures can be used within the classroom context, teaching evaluation. And these are 2 actual real examples that we actually used, that students actually produced. They looked at 2 different interventions, as you can see, Maple and Invest in Kids, and they really tried to use this exercise to understand some of the problems and the context at hand.
Yeah, and then like from this, we start building the logic model or the theory of change, but they've started from this visual understanding of context. It also reveals what they don't know because the students don't have as much direct experience and we don't have access to all the different stakeholders. So we can also use this to say, look at what we don't know and what we might want to learn about and ask. Yeah. I'm going to really hand it to you, Melvin. So on the last slide, there's our contact information and some resources. So Better Evaluation has a great link on Rich Pictures, and there are a couple of books out there. One of them is free still, the system diagram book. It shows other system diagrams, but rich pictures as well. So there's some good guidance out there. And thank you. Thanks for the examples, Clara. Oops. Yeah, so with that, Dr. Hall, can I hand it to you?
Yes, I will take it. We have about 4 minutes and I have 2 or 3 things that I want to talk about. The first is Rich Pictures provides an excellent way to talk about where a person, what their place is and what their role is in a context. Because generally without prompting, people will do the rich picture as an external. In other words, they won't draw themselves into the picture. So part of the discussion and the way that these drawings can be used is to then have people identify where they are, where they fit. And a second part of that is, what is their vantage point? Because once they are located in the diagram, then it becomes clear that there are some things in the evaluand that they can see and other things that they can't. The other principle that I think is really important and usefully pulled out in discussion of rich pictures is boundary definitions. Context is, of course, where we get meaning, and it's where sense making occurs. And rich pictures are an effort to get people in touch with and thinking about context. Well, within that context, there are boundaries, and some of the diagrams we looked at that you did today had boundaries. They had, like the crown, I remember, was one, and pillars. So when boundaries appear in a rich picture, one of the things that people can be prompted to do is to ask, does that have to be a boundary? And what is the significance of that boundary? So there are ways in which rich pictures can provide a segue into discussion of things that might be very difficult to otherwise go into or take much longer to pull out. So I think that's probably about all the time we have. And there's another, maybe one question or comment before the plug is pulled. If not, I want to thank my colleagues, Emily and Aileen, and my new colleague, who I just met. I'm looking for you now so I can find your name.
Clara.
Where'd you go?
Yep, Clara.
Clara.
Clara, there we go, Clara.
There she is.
Sorry. Thank you for presenting this skill building and thought-provoking workshop. Also, all remember to complete the evaluations for the session.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. We see a few questions coming in. We will probably get pulled if we try to answer those, but so do you ever
Well, we do have the option of continuing to communicate via email. And I know I'd be happy to respond to any comments or questions that are posted through the conference platform. And you get points for raising and asking.
Emily, you're muted. There was one question in the chat. Do you ever have folks list out some of the components before drawing?
Just curious when like group facilitation stuff to get kind of people started.
Mm-hmm. Emily can definitely jump in on this one, but normally we tried something different with this workshop, but normally everybody's focused on just the same issue. And so sometimes there's lead up because maybe it's part of a big institute and we've been talking about these issues and concepts and those kinds of things. So folks are okay just going into it. But I have in the work that I've done, I've never had folks list out anything before. That would be the closest in the fact that it's part of a broader or bigger institute so that the concepts and the themes and the issues, and we're talking about context and we're talking about systemic issues like that. So it's already on the minds of folks and now they just come and adapt it to their specific context as they're drawing their rich picture. Does that answer your question?
That's helpful. Yeah.
Emily, did you want to add anything else?
No, just sorry if my head was dotting. I got like out.
You just froze. Emily's having problems because she's been booted on and off. So, but I think that's it. I think we're at time. Thank you all. Again, our contact information is on the slides. So feel free to email us, connect with us via LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, all those places. We'll be happy to connect with you some more. Thanks again, everyone.